Our guest right now is Dr. Henry Paul. He's a New York-based psychiatrist and the president of the American Institute for Psychoanalysis. And good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Paterson. I
have been dying to ask you all day, this type of a crime, this whole reckless and horrible disregard for human life being chronicled in notes all during this time when this suspect is keeping it secret from the world, but then in certainly enough time that there may have been action taken and his plan may have been thwarted, he sends this package to a psychiatrist professor at the University of Colorado Medical Center. Why would he do that?
Well, as you said at the beginning of this part of the show, we have an unquenchable thirst almost to find out more about this person because of the unspeakable and highly difficult to understand nature. So we're looking for all these little details, and everything is very fascinating. And here's another example. Here's a guy who, typical of mass murderers, planned it, detailed it. That's not particularly surprising that he did that. But why, do you ask, would he send it to somebody? And this shows you how conflicted and how difficult this is to understand, because it implies to me a great ambivalence, mixed feelings about the act, possibly unconscious, that in some way, I think by sending that, he was asking to be stopped. But that was only part of his personality. The larger part had this tremendous compulsive and impulsive drive to be destructive. And thus, there is no one answer to most of the questions about someone so ill, because it's all mixed up with conflict after conflict after conflict. So this inconsistency is what makes us wonder, but that is what this is about.
I heard once, and listeners to this show know that my brain is deteriorating, but as best I can recall this, I read that there are two sort of lobes in the front of the brain that when people become very angry, they become filled, I guess, with a fluid or something, and that, say, after a fight, that this buildup is diminished. And this is why often people do things, and they're very sorry about it later. Now, we, of course, had the murder on the Long Island Railroad, Colin Ferguson,
right,
in 1993. As soon as he finished shooting and the police apprehended him, he said to them, "I did a very bad thing."
Right.
Well, if he knew that an hour before, 7 people wouldn't have lost their lives. Is that basically true? Does this ignite any thought?
You asked two questions, so let me just answer them separately and quickly. Number one, I wish we knew what lobes of the brain or what gene or what enzyme or what chemical or what neurotransmitter had to do.
Right. So this, I guess, is a theory I was reading.
Yes, but what you're remembering with your good brain, I might say, is that people are doing PET scan research, and they're subjecting people to various emotional states, and then they do a scan, and what lights up might imply something or other. But certainly, nothing is proven, and there's no anatomical or biochemical cause for acts like this that we know of. Someday we might know. But B, the other statement of remorse after a killing, which this man, by the way, has not expressed.
No, that's correct.
Sometimes there's a feeling of remorse because during the act of a massively violent act, one is almost in a febrile state emotionally. It's like a toxic, quasi-psychotic or psychotic state where one is dissociated somewhat from other aspects of his personality. So when the event is over, there's almost a return to a normal conscience because that phase is over. It's like a toxin has come over him and is being released, and then it's kind of over. And that's why I might say some people have equated these acts, not me in particular, with the sexual act. That sometimes when making love, we move to a kind of altered state of mind, sometimes even when we're in love. And then after it's over, we kind of return to a more, quote, normal state.
Kind of a resolution.
Yes. Kind of okay, it's over. We can relax. And sometimes you'll see that with people who commit violent acts. They don't even sometimes remember the details of what they did. because there's really an altered state of mind.
Now, what will come up in this trial, of course, is the plea in which in New York is known as the not responsible plea,
yes,
but better known as the insanity defense.
Right.
But theoretically, whether this individual was cognizant of what they were doing at the time or not, wouldn't it be a good idea to keep them in some kind of custody for the rest of their life? Because even if they were temporarily insane, we don't know when they're going to go back to that state again.
Right. Well, these are very hazy parts of judicial statutes and psychiatry where they kind of come together. I think that in all probability, he is able to assist in his defense, which is part of the insanity defense. And B, I think by his asking for a lawyer right after the event is what I read.
Right. That's right.
That he probably knew between right and wrong, which is the other part of the insanity defense. But there's another point to be made. There's another reason he should be kept in custody the rest of his life, so we can study him. Some of the people against the death penalty, and there are many reasons for being against the death penalty or for it, say that one of the greatest things about getting rid of the death penalty is we'll be allowed to study murderers' minds, because we really don't know what makes people murder people. And if we kept people alive, if for no other reason, it would be to do psychiatric research on what makes people commit psychotic acts. And some people feel a murder of any sort is a psychotic act, especially a mass murder.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could do both.
Right.
Now, so, Doctor, is what we're talking about in its simplicity a struggle in someone's mind between good and evil? Because in some respects, it appears that some of these people have no control over what they're doing. And so while we have a neurological explanation for it, it could also fit in with a sort of religious perspective that there are some people who they kind of want to do the right thing, but they don't have enough control themselves to affect it.
Moving away from the religious aspect of it and the concepts of evil, which has been studied, for hundreds of years, I'm certainly no specialist on this. I would say that generally, most psychiatrists would believe that this man's struggle was between feeling alive and feeling dead, and that due to his personality problems, he had a deadened feeling inside of himself, along with depression and a tremendous feeling of vindictive rage. And because of that, he felt like a helpless human being. And the more helpless we are, the more angry we are. They're almost equivalent words. Anger comes from a feeling of helplessness. So thus, I believe that his degree of helplessness, which was probably lifelong, but triggered by a relatively mundane event that most of us would consider mundane or certainly not cataclysmic, he was triggered, and he went off and he decided to defy the world and destroy because he felt destroyed. When we start positing concepts of evil and instinct, they were on a whole different way of understanding people. And that you'd have to refer that question to someone
yes,
theology.
I got it.
Right.
Now, we've all felt angry. We have all felt depressed. And we've all felt helpless. What, and I guess this is a question that I'm asking for an answer I can't totally get, but just your thoughts on the sense where you kind of transpose yourself now to, in other words, I'll walk down the street and I'm angry at somebody.
Yeah, but not like this.
But I'm not angry at the other people who are passing me on the street because they didn't do anything to me. It's this point where you transfer over and now you're going to try to kill 400 innocent people in a movie theater because you're angry.
Well,
how does that happen?
Well, it's not only because you're angry, but you're looking to feel a feeling of restitution for wrongs done to you. You're looking for revenge against people who might have hurt you, and you're looking to feel alive in a dead personality. It's very hard for us, by the way, to empathize with this, because most of us, like you, will walk down the street, we'll be angry at somebody for something. We're not going to knock off anybody on the street. But when you have a feeling of a deadness in you, what we call in psychoanalysis an alienation from oneself that goes so deep that your identity is actually besmudged, then something happens to you that is almost impossible to empathize with. It's this feeling of just destroying and destroying and destroying. But the meaning of it is not to destroy only, but it's to feel alive on the heap of the death.
Have you felt in your own diagnoses that you could sense that coming in someone as opposed to someone who just may be depressed or more likely to harm themselves than to harm others?
It's a great question because, for the past few days I've been thinking the best thing that could come out of this horrible, horrible tragedy is that people would be more alert to the signs and symptoms in their neighbors, friends, or family so that we could avoid this, because the facts are this is very, very hard to pinpoint. Even in the mental health professions where we do violence assessments, it's very, very weak, the ability to really assess the potential for future violence. So, in answer to your question, it's very difficult, although at times I've been able to, I think, sense when someone's about to explode, but often not. And it kind of comes out of, like this guy. He had a pretty good history. There was no tip-off here that, looked at his character structure and his family and his education. There was no tip-off this guy's a future mass murderer.
No, the other thing that happened was he kind of stopped doing well in school.
That's right.
Which happens to a lot of people, and particularly in that age group. I think everybody had a little dip in there.
But in hindsight, probably the deterioration of school functioning had to do with a slow impending decompensation. He was already getting a step beyond depressed, that the rage was taking place, and maybe his mind wasn't functioning as well because he was getting eaten up by these fantasies inside of revenge, which I think, if I remember from my reading, was really going on for a few months, is ordering this ammunition and the guns. So probably there was a several-month period, what we call a prodromal state, where he was beginning, these things were coming together for him. But what I'm saying is most people, we only get a hindsight history because, and even that I might say is difficult because many of these people are trying to commit suicide when they do this.
Right.
So they end up dead, and we never really know except we go into computers and we try to do retrospective research, but we really never get a good feeling. So it's hard to do a prospective study, and it's difficult in the retrospect to kind of figure out what's going on because it's all secondhand information.
And again, back to the question that caused me to seek you out, and thanks so much for spending time with us.
My pleasure.
Today, Dr. Paul. But I guess, is it a cry for help or maybe a little good left in him that sends this letter almost like, stop me, I'm going to kill somebody?
Yes, my guess and my assumption would be based on 30 years of doing this, is that there was a little mixed feeling there still. There was enough of a human being emotionally to kind of reach out in this way to the psychiatrist. By the way, we don't know whether this was his psychiatrist, a famous psychiatrist, someone on his campus.
Right, we don't even know if they had any contact.
We don't know, but just the thing of sending something to a person known to help people who are struggling with mental disease is, to me, a statement that the guy was looking for some type of break to be put on this.
Right. Dr. Henry Paul has been our guest, and Dr. Henry Paul's new book, When Kids
Need Meds.
When Kids Need Meds, Everything a Patient Needs to Know, everything a parent needs to know about psychiatric medication and youngsters. This is a subject we've talked about on this show, Doctor. Hopefully, since it is your new book, maybe in a week or two you can come back and talk to us about that.
Just give me a call. I'll be glad to join you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.